whatever plus anti-tanning kapons kate. Is pensas ke ki wabun se zikin ki warin bai.
Blackhead prevention works best when it is gentle, steady, and realistic, because blackheads usually develop slowly as oil, dead skin cells, sweat, leftover product, and everyday friction collect around the opening of the pore over time. So the smartest approach is not to attack the skin, but to keep it calmer, cleaner, and less congested without creating fresh irritation. A simple routine is often more effective than an exciting one. Cleanse the face in the morning and again at night with a mild cleanser and lukewarm water, because very hot water can strip the skin barrier and leave the face feeling tight, dry, and more reactive. Use your fingertips rather than rough scrubs, abrasive washcloths, or stiff cleansing brushes, because blackhead-prone skin usually responds better to calm handling than to aggressive rubbing. If you sweat after exercise, yard work, housework, hot weather, or a long day under sunscreen and makeup, it helps to rinse or cleanse the skin as soon as practical, because sweat mixed with oil and residue can sit on the surface and add to that heavy, clogged feeling. Avoid squeezing, scraping, pinching, digging, or trying to force blackheads out at home, because that often causes more redness, swelling, irritation, lingering marks, and regret than the original blackheads ever caused. Choose non-comedogenic products whenever possible, including moisturizer, sunscreen, makeup, and hair products, especially if your hair touches your forehead, temples, or cheeks. A lightweight moisturizer can help, because skin that becomes too dry often becomes irritated, and irritated skin makes people impatient, and impatient people are exactly the ones most likely to stand too close to a bathroom mirror and start making decisions they would not defend the next morning. If you use over-the-counter acne care, it is usually smarter to begin slowly with one well-chosen active ingredient instead of layering several strong treatments at once. Salicylic acid may help keep pores clearer, and adapalene may help reduce clogged pores over time, but patience matters more than panic. Improvement usually comes from steady use over time, not from one dramatic weekend of treating your face like a chemistry experiment. Remove makeup before bed. Change pillowcases regularly. Clean the things that touch your face often, like phone screens, eyeglass frames, hat bands, and helmet straps. Keep heavier oils and styling products away from acne-prone skin when you can. Try not to rest your face in your hands for long stretches while reading, thinking, worrying, driving, scrolling, or politely listening to a story that should have ended 15 minutes ago. Stress management matters too, not because stress alone causes every blackhead, but because stress often leads to poor sleep, rushed cleansing, more face touching, more picking, skipped routines, and the kind of late-night bathroom behavior that always feels strangely productive until daylight arrives with a very different opinion. Diet does not need to become a courtroom trial, but hydration, regular meals, moderation, and decent sleep support better daily habits overall. If blackheads are stubborn, widespread, mixed with inflamed acne, or simply not improving despite a sensible routine, professional guidance may save time and frustration. Prevention is rarely glamorous. It usually looks like repeating calm habits, reducing friction, choosing products the skin can tolerate, and remembering that steady care beats dramatic interference most of the time. And that same principle, the principle that not every little inconvenience needs to be squeezed, overworked, dramatized, or turned into a full public emergency, would have saved Lawrence Larry Bickford of Maple Hill Retirement Village in Indiana a great deal of avoidable nonsense if anyone had explained it to him before the annual sock hop and Sunday social, because Larry had spent 79 years believing that almost every problem in life could be improved by straighter chairs, better labeling, and one person in the room willing to use a serious voice. Larry was a retired county permit clerk with a square face, excellent posture, and the deeply rooted conviction that extension cords should never curl freely in a civilized building. He lived with his wife Jean in a neat ranch-style duplex with pale shutters, a porch swing, and a linen closet so precisely arranged that guests sometimes shut it again out of respect. Jean was 76. A retired fourth-grade teacher with soft white hair, quick eyes, and the kind of seasoned humor that only arrives after 50 years of marriage to a man who thinks every social event would improve if the folding chairs were aligned with greater moral intention. Maple Hill was one of those Midwestern retirement communities where everyone said they were cutting back on activities while somehow maintaining enough committees, socials, lunches, games, and seasonal events to exhaust a cruise director. There was card club on Monday, walking group on Tuesday, hymn singing on Wednesday, movie night on Thursday, potluck on Friday, and every August there was the sock hop and Sunday social, a nostalgic evening of old songs, paper streamers, root beer floats, dancing, costume prizes, and grandchildren visiting in bright socks and plastic sunglasses. Jean loved it. She liked the old music, the silly costume contest, the root beer floats sweating in paper cups, the way a room full of older Americans became 17 again for 2 hours, and then returned to being sensible before bed. Larry hated it in principle. He did not object to music. He objected to music plus melted ice cream, plus extension cords, plus grandchildren spinning near table legs. A social should not require this much cleanup potential, he would say. Jean would answer, "That is because you think joy should come with a maintenance manual." Larry's closest friends at Maple Hill were Bud Kramer, 80 retired farm equipment salesman, hard of hearing whenever anyone asked him to volunteer but fully alert around dessert. Frances Doyle, 74, former church secretary, a woman with perfect diction and a talent for making devastating remarks sound like weather updates. And Owen Miller, 78, widower, retired barber, owner of one fine pair of bowling shoes, and a laugh like a porch swing, finding religion. The regular master of ceremonies for the sock hop and Sunday social was a bright, tireless former radio ad salesman named Kenny Doyle, who wore sport coats in colors nature had wisely avoided and spoke into a microphone as if every sentence deserved sponsorship. Kenny could make the phrase vanilla syrup station sound like breaking news. Unfortunately, at 5:15 on the evening of the social, he called from home sounding hoarse and defeated after discovering that the seafood salad he had trusted for lunch had not returned the favor. Jean took the call while Larry was adjusting the fan in the living room and said, "Oh no," followed by, "That is terrible," followed by the sentence that always made Larry suspicious, which was, "Well, Larry is right here." He looked over at her immediately. "No, I haven't said anything yet," Jean replied. "Your face has." 20 minutes later, the event chair, Miss Roberta Hale, arrived at their door with a clipboard, a lanyard, and the focused expression of a woman whose evening had lost a critical part and was already scanning for replacement organs. Roberta was 68, formerly a school office manager, and had the precise, unstoppable energy of someone who had spent decades dealing with field trips, copier jams, and adults who should have known better. "Larry," she said brightly. "No," he answered. "You don't know what I'm asking. I know enough from your shoes. Kenny is out. I need an MC." "That sounds unfortunate for Kenny. It is also unfortunate for me." "That remains a you sentence." Roberta ignored him and kept going. "You know everyone. You speak clearly. You look authoritative." Bud, who had followed her down the hall for reasons he called concern and everyone else called entertainment, laughed so hard he had to brace himself on the doorframe. Frances appeared from the apartment across the hall holding her purse and said, "She's right. He already looks like he's here to inspect the jukebox." Jean, who should have defended him if fairness had any place in marriage, instead folded her arms and said, "He does have an excellent microphone voice when he's annoyed." "That," Larry said, "is not support. That is betrayal in sensible shoes." But Roberta had already placed the microphone and the cue cards into his hands, and once a practical man is holding the equipment, half the battle is over. "You just introduce the dances, announce the costume contest, keep the kids away from the soda fountain, and call the Sunday bar at the right time," she said. "That's all." Larry stared at her. No sentence containing the words "just" and "Sunday bar" has ever led anywhere safe. But by 6:30 he was standing at the front of the Maple Hill Recreation Hall in a clean blue shirt, sensible loafers, and the expression of a man who had somehow become official without ever consenting in writing. The hall looked like a 1950s diner had married a church fellowship supper and then hired a high school art club for decorations. Pink and turquoise streamers hung from the ceiling. A cardboard jukebox stood beside the stage. The Sunday bar glittered along one wall with syrups, cherries, whipped cream, sprinkles, nuts, crushed cookies, and exactly the kind of melting dairy threat Larry had predicted all week. A portable speaker sat on a rolling cart near the dance area. Its cables stretched across the floor in a way that Larry found morally upsetting. Children in bright skirts and rolled jeans ran between folding chairs. Grandparents waved and pointed and took phone pictures as if they had never before seen a child in fake cat-eye glasses. Larry tapped the microphone. It squealed once. He frowned at it with such immediate disappointment that the front table started laughing before he had said a word. "Good evening," he said. "If you can hear me, excellent. If you cannot, please move closer to someone with stronger hearing and weaker commentary." The room laughed at once. Even Larry looked faintly irritated by how effective that had been. He continued, "Welcome to the Sock Hop and Sunday Social. We ask only a few things tonight. Please keep children off the speaker cord. Please do not begin building your Sunday until announced. And if your outfit sheds glitter, I would appreciate advance warning." Bigger laugh. Jean, seated at table 3 beside Frances and 2 other wives who enjoyed being right in groups, leaned over and whispered, "He's going to be very good." Frances replied, "That is the worst possible thing for his ego and therefore wonderful." The first half hour went well. Larry introduced the opening oldies playlist, as if filing a permit. He announced the costume parade with grave formality. He called out acts in the voice of a man who had accidentally been placed in charge of nostalgia and meant to do it correctly if forced. Please welcome the junior jitterbug pair, who are younger than my lawnmower and significantly more flexible. At 7:15, we will have the costume judging, which I remind you is friendly in theory. The root beer float station is not open yet, and anyone beginning early will be remembered. The crowd loved him. They loved him because he sounded serious enough to trust and bemused enough to be funny. And those two qualities together are irresistible to older Americans with cake nearby. Then came the costume parade. There were saddle shoes, poodle skirts, leather jackets, polka dot scarves, rolled sleeves, one gentleman in a maroon Letterman cardigan that still fit suspiciously well, and one tiny boy in sunglasses carrying a toy microphone with the full self-belief of a future inconvenience. Larry introduced each contestant with the dry civic tone of a man describing a parade permit. Mrs. Talbot in a pink skirt and confidence that should be licensed. Mr. Jenkins in a leather jacket that appears to have survived both weather and memory. Young Oliver in sunglasses, and what I can only describe as unauthorized charm. The room loved that too. Then came the teenager in the Elvis wig. His name was Chase. He belonged to someone's granddaughter from Fort Wayne, and he had clearly been promised money or pizza in exchange for this appearance. He strutted onto the dance floor in a white jacket, lip curled twice for dramatic effect, and took the microphone from Larry for his one line. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the wig, which had already looked undersecured, shifted on the second thank you and slid backward until it perched on the crown of his head, like exhausted roadkill. The room gasped. Chase froze. One little girl screamed with laughter. Larry took the microphone back and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has entered a transitional phase." The hall collapsed. Chase laughed, fixed the wig, and bowed, which only made the applause louder. Roberta, from the side wall, actually had to lean against the refreshments table. The social had now crossed the line from pleasant event into future legend, and the night was still young. After the costume parade came dancing. The children bopped, the grandparents shuffled, the older couples did gentle turns that said romance with good knees and reasonable shoes. Larry kept the schedule moving and the room breathing. He announced the slow dance, the hula hoop challenge, the limbo that should never have been approved, and the one brief pause for water before the Sunday bar opened. That was when the first true disaster developed, slowly and publicly, like all the best ones. The cardboard jukebox beside the stage had been standing happily for an hour, held up by tape, optimism, and what Larry privately called decorative denial. During the hula hoop challenge, a little girl named Madison spun her hoop too ambitiously, took one wide step backward, and clipped the bottom corner of the cardboard jukebox. It did not fall. That would have been too simple. Instead, it leaned, then leaned more, then stopped leaning and simply committed. It tipped sideways with all the solemn grace of a building in an old movie, brushing the portable speaker cart as it went. The cart rolled 1 foot. The cable tightened. The music skipped. 3 children screamed. One grandfather shouted, "Save the jukebox!" and did not help. Larry looked at the whole unfolding scene, lifted the microphone and said, "No one panic. The jukebox is decorative and therefore emotionally unstable." The room exploded. Children laughed. Adults doubled over. Even the little girl who had hit it forgot to be ashamed, because the line landed like a plate dropping at the exact right wetting. 2 volunteers caught the cardboard jukebox before it hit the floor. Larry stepped off the stage, repositioned the speaker cart with one practiced shove of his loafer, and added, "This is why cardboard should never be trusted with rhythm." Another wave of laughter. By then, the audience was not merely attending the event. They were watching Larry narrate the collapse of decorative confidence, and it was better than half the acts. The Sunday bar opened 10 minutes later, which should have been joyful, and was, but joy plus children plus syrup pumps is not a stable chemical structure. The line formed quickly. Grandchildren stacked bowls as if building monuments. Grandmothers tried to act moderate and then asked for extra hot fudge in voices they thought no one heard. Bud put so many peanuts on his sundae that Francis asked whether he was decorating for winter. Larry stood beside the table with the microphone and tried to preserve lane discipline. One sauce first, then toppings. No, ma'am, 7 cherries is not a garnish, it is a statement. Please do not pump chocolate while facing the opposite direction. He was doing surprisingly well until someone placed the banana pudding too near the edge. The banana pudding belonged to Mrs. Leona Griggs, who had been making it since Eisenhower and believed no gathering of decent people should proceed without it. It sat in a heavy glass bowl near the whipped cream canister, safe enough until a visiting grandson reached for sprinkles, nudged the whipped cream, nudged the spoon tray, and caused the tablecloth to ripple like a flag receiving bad news. The bowl of pudding slid forward a magnificent inch. 3 women gasped. Larry moved before reason finished dressing. One hand caught the bowl, the other slapped the table edge to stop the slide. The clip-on microphone recorded his entire muttered response for the whole hall to hear. Absolutely not. We are not losing pudding to toppings. The room detonated. Not laughter exactly. Social collapse. Bud had to sit down. Roberta nearly fell against the cookie table. Jean laughed so hard, she put her forehead on Francis's shoulder. Larry, still holding the bowl, set it back with ceremonial care and added, "For everyone's peace of mind, the banana pudding remains under supervision." That line spread instantly through the room. People repeated it to each other in clusters. One child asked if the pudding had done something bad. A grandfather replied, "Not anymore." Once things calmed, Larry resumed crowd control with the full authority of a man who had now saved dessert in public. Unfortunately, fate had one more round left. The final act of the evening was a grandmother-granddaughter ukulele duet. Their names were Dot and Kaylee, and they were sweet, prepared, and standing directly where a sane person would not have placed a floor fan. The fan had been set near the stage to keep the hall from turning into a butter crisis. During the second verse of Blue Moon, Dot shifted her chair, nudged the fan cord, and the fan swung sideways just enough to blast a paper stack of costume scorecards off the judging table. The cards flew like startled birds across the dance floor, the front row, and directly into the Sunday line, where one landed in the whipped cream, one in Bud's peanuts, and one, with wicked accuracy, on the shoulder of Elvis, whose wig had only recently recovered its dignity. The room lost any remaining ability to behave like adults. Larry stepped back to the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, voting has now become meteorological." The hall rose. Not just laughter now. Applause, howling, table slapping, complete surrender. Even Dot on the ukulele was laughing too hard to continue. The entire event paused while people wiped eyes, picked scorecards out of whipped cream, and steadied themselves against chairs. Larry waited. Blackhead prevention works best when it is gentle, steady, and realistic, because blackheads usually develop slowly as oil, dead skin cells, sweat, leftover product, and ordinary daily friction collect around the opening of the pore over time. So the smartest approach is not to attack the skin, but to keep it calmer, cleaner, and less congested without creating fresh irritation. A simple routine is often more effective than an exciting one. Cleanse the face in the morning and again at night with a mild cleanser and lukewarm water, because very hot water can strip the skin barrier and leave the face feeling tight, dry, and more reactive. Use your fingertips rather than rough scrubs, abrasive washcloths, or stiff cleansing brushes, because blackhead-prone skin usually responds better to calm handling than to aggressive rubbing. If you sweat after exercise, yard work, housework, hot weather, or a long day under sunscreen and makeup, it helps to rinse or cleanse the skin as soon as practical, because sweat mixed with oil and residue can sit on the surface and add to that heavy, clogged feeling. Avoid squeezing, scraping, pinching, digging, or trying to force blackheads out at home, because that often causes more redness, swelling, irritation, lingering marks, and regret than the original blackheads ever caused. Choose non-comedogenic products whenever possible, including moisturizer, sunscreen, makeup, and hair products, especially if your hair touches your forehead, temples, or cheeks. A lightweight moisturizer can help because skin that becomes too dry often becomes irritated, and irritated skin makes people impatient, and impatient people are exactly the ones most likely to stand too close to a bathroom mirror and start making decisions they would not defend the next morning. If you use over-the-counter acne care, it is usually smarter to begin slowly with one well-chosen active ingredient instead of layering several strong treatments at once. Salicylic acid may help keep pores clearer, and adapalene may help reduce clogged pores over time. But patience matters more than panic. Improvement usually comes from steady use over time, not from one dramatic weekend of treating your face like a chemistry experiment. Remove makeup before bed, change pillowcases regularly, clean the things that touch your face often, like phone screens, eyeglass frames, hat bands, and helmet straps. Keep heavier oils and styling products away from acne-prone skin when you can. Try not to rest your face in your hands for long stretches while reading, thinking, worrying, driving, scrolling, or politely listening to a story that should have ended 15 minutes ago. Stress management matters too, not because stress alone causes every blackhead, but because stress often leads to poor sleep, rushed cleansing, more face touching, more picking, skipped routines, and the kind of late-night bathroom behavior that always feels strangely productive until daylight arrives with a very different opinion. Diet does not need to become a courtroom trial, but hydration, regular meals, moderation, and decent sleep support better daily habits overall. If blackheads are stubborn, widespread, mixed with inflamed acne, or simply not improving despite a sensible routine, professional guidance may save time and frustration. Prevention is rarely glamorous. It usually looks like repeating calm habits, reducing friction, choosing products the skin can tolerate, and remembering that steady care beats dramatic interference most of the time. And that same principle, the principle that not every little annoyance requires a dramatic response, would have saved Gerald Jerry Morrow of Pine Hollow Senior Apartments in Kentucky a tremendous amount of public confusion if anyone had bothered to explain it to him before the afternoon. He accidentally became the emergency announcer, referee, mediator, and moral witness of the first annual Rain Delay Recreation Rally, a completely improvised indoor event created after the community picnic got rained out so violently that half the residents arrived at the clubhouse carrying deviled eggs, folding chairs, and grievances they had not planned to air until later in the week. Jerry was 78 years old, retired after 42 years as purchasing coordinator for a regional hardware distributor, which meant he had spent most of his life surrounded by invoices, bulk orders, utility carts, and men who believed every object in the building had a proper shelf if people would only stop setting things down wherever feelings placed them. He lived with his wife, Elaine, in a tidy ground floor apartment with a white storm door, 2 potted ferns, a basket for incoming mail, a basket for outgoing mail, and a closet so carefully arranged that his granddaughter once said it looked like Target if it got stricter, and married a church deacon. Elaine was 75, a retired elementary school counselor with silver hair, warm eyes, and the kind of light effortless patience that only develops after decades of being married to a man who could turn a paper towel shortage into a lecture on civilization. Pine Hollow was one of those American retirement communities where people insisted they liked quiet, even while signing up for enough activities to keep a small county alive. There was cards on Mondays, walking club on Tuesdays, hymn sing on Wednesdays, casserole lunch on Thursdays, old movie night on Fridays, and in warm weather there was always something larger, louder, and more hopeful involving tables, coolers, and weather forecasts people took too personally. The annual summer picnic was usually the crown jewel. Lawn chairs under the pavilion, grilled chicken, bingo, pie, lawn games, and visiting grandchildren running around with sticky fingers and no concept of spatial limits. Jerry disliked the picnic on principle. He liked food, he liked sitting outside, and he even liked most of the people, but he believed all three lost quality the moment a raffle microphone entered the environment. He also believed paper plates should never be trusted within 12 feet of wind. Elaine loved the picnic because it made everybody softer. Men who grumbled all week laughed at beanbag toss. Children wore ridiculous hats, and women brought desserts with the full unspoken confidence of people who knew damn well they had beaten store-bought. But on this particular Saturday, a hard summer thunderstorm rolled in an hour before the event. The lawn flooded. The pavilion drummed with rain so loud it sounded like roofing was being judged. The grills were abandoned. The tables were dragged into the clubhouse recreation hall, where panic and optimism began wrestling without supervision. The activities chair, a widow named Nancy Dillard, who wore bright cardigans and treated every setback as if it were simply a puzzle rude enough to arrive early, announced that the picnic would become an indoor rain delay recreation rally. No one knew what that meant. This did not stop her. Within 15 minutes, she had reclassified bingo as rapid number recreation, turned beanbag toss into laundry basket accuracy trials, assigned a table for cookies, a table for cards, and a table for family-friendly challenge stations, and informed everyone that the children would not be allowed to slide in socks across the hallway, no matter how strongly they believed in it. The original MC, a cheerful former local radio salesman named Donnie Fitch, had driven home before the storm worsened because his windshield wipers made a sound he didn't trust. This left Nancy with no microphone man, and more dangerously, no one to keep the crowd pointed in the same general direction. That was when she saw Jerry standing near the coffee urn with a paper plate, a rain-spotted polo shirt, and the exact kind of face responsible people mistake for help. "Jerry," she said. He didn't even look up. "No, you don't know what I'm asking. Your shoes do. They're walking too fast for anything I want." Nancy arrived in front of him clutching a clipboard and a hand mic with a long black cord already trying to tangle itself around a chair leg. "I need someone organized to handle announcements." "No, Donnie's gone." "That sounds like foresight." "Jerry." Nancy, Elaine, who knew disaster when it smiled politely, stood back and folded her arms. "He does sound good on a microphone," she offered, with the calm treachery only wives can deliver elegantly. Jerry turned his head slowly. "That is not support." "No," she said, "that's recognition." A retired feed store owner named Mel from 2 tables over shouted, "He'd be great. He already sounds like he's in charge of things we haven't broken yet." The room laughed, which weakened Jerry's legal position immediately. Nancy placed the microphone into his hand with the speed of a woman who had no intention of letting a practical man regain mobility once she had made contact. "You just keep people informed, direct the games, and make sure no child gets underneath the dessert table." "That sentence alone proves this event should not continue," Jerry muttered. Yet 5 minutes later, he was standing at the front of the hall beside a fake ficus tree and a crooked sign that had once said Summer Picnic and now had Rain Delay Rally written over it in marker. The recreation hall looked like a civic compromise. Folding chairs lined one wall. A card table held brownies, lemon bars, and something called Cherry Cloud that nobody would define without waving one hand. There were puddled umbrellas by the door, children in damp sneakers, grandparents fanning themselves with church bulletins, and a stack of board games near the piano that already looked morally endangered. Jerry tapped the microphone. It squealed. He frowned. "Good afternoon," he said. "If you can hear me, excellent. If you cannot, sit closer to someone with stronger hearing and weaker opinions." The room laughed instantly. Even Jerry looked mildly inconvenienced by the fact that he was apparently good at this. He pressed on. "Welcome to the Rain Delay Recreation Rally, a title I objected to before hearing it. We will begin with snack stabilization, then proceed to indoor games. Children may participate in all activities except operating the coffee urn, critiquing deviled eggs, or climbing furniture under the excuse of weather disappointment." Bigger laugh. Nancy took 3 full breaths of relief beside the prize basket. Elaine sat down at table 6 with 2 friends and said, "There he goes." The first hour was mostly manageable. Jerry announced card tables, directed people toward the laundry basket toss, and clarified that competitive pudding appreciation was not an official event, no matter what table 4 was trying to make happen. He had a dry, civic way of speaking that made every ridiculous thing sound both funnier and safer. The jigsaw table is now open, though I remind everyone this is not a referendum on patience. Children participating in hallway relay must remain on feet, not knees, not elbows, and certainly not imagination. The brownies are first come, first served, but if you cut a corner piece and then leave the edges looking confused, you will be judged. The residents loved him. They loved him because he sounded like the exact man you'd want handling nonsense once nonsense had already entered the room. Then came the first actual crisis. The children's relay was designed to be harmless. Carry a rolled-up dish towel from one chair to another, circle a cone, and come back. No one had planned for Trevor, age 9, visiting from Louisville, who had the energy of 4 legal problems and 1 missing nap. Trevor took off too fast, hit the cone, spun sideways, and crashed directly into the decorative tower of canned sodas on the refreshment table. The tower tilted, adults gasped. One woman yelled, "The drinks!" as if they were livestock escaping. Jerry stepped forward without thinking and said into the microphone, "No one panic. Carbonation has not yet achieved freedom." The room collapsed laughing while 2 grandfathers caught the soda tower with the reflexes of men who had once saved televisions from falling in 1987 and still considered it a point of pride. Trevor stood up unharmed and immediately asked whether that still counted as speed, which only made things worse in the best way. Jerry pointed one finger and said, "Young man, chaos is not a time bonus." The line traveled through the room within minutes. Then came the talent section. Because it was raining and everyone was trapped together, Nancy decided it would be a shame not to let people share whatever performances they had planned for the picnic. This was an alarming sentence, but by then Jerry had accepted that the afternoon had already left the road. A widow named Arlene sang Crazy with more feeling than the room had expected before 2 o'clock. A little boy barked like a hound and then like a smaller hound. A retired dentist recited a poem about tomatoes that was much too intense for tomatoes. Jerry introduced them all with the same exacting dryness. Please welcome Arlene Watkins, who appears prepared to restore order through Patsy Cline. Next we have Benjamin Orr, who will now provide a brief overview of regional dog sounds. After that, Dr. Felton, proving once again that